Hello viewers, welcome to another segment of Budget in Focus. I am now joined by Minister of Social Cohesion with responsibility for culture, youth and sports, Dr. George Norton. Welcome to Budget in Focus.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now today we're focusing on budget 2018. What were some of your initial thoughts on the budget as presented by the Minister of Finance?
Well, I must tell you that while I've witnessed so many budgets before, even as a minister, this is the first time I'm in this portfolio of social cohesion, which is divided into four areas. That is social cohesion per se, then we have culture, youth and sports. And while every effort is being made and recommendations given that it should never be in a silo, yet it is to some extent treated in that way. That which is given to sports, a portion is given to culture, and an allocation to youths. And social cohesion would have their own activity as well. It was interesting. Because I'm a member of cabinet, I would be fully aware of how much of a constraint we are operating under, and would be prepared to make do of whatever is offered to me.
So how do you feel about the allocations to the various areas with which you have responsibility?
The budget is never enough. But the mere fact that it was pointed out, for instance, in the area of sports, that there might not have been any increase, yet I know that in terms of results of what we achieved in 2017 is so much more than we've ever done before. And as I said, I'm prepared to make use of all that we have. I know for a fact that our public sector investment program has not been doing well, and I plan to make certain that we don't fall a victim of that. I was quite impressed when somebody was noted for, a minister that is, was noted for spending all his allocation early, like by September of the year. I think that's a good thing, and I would want to follow in that footstep.
Okay. Social cohesion is a very important mandate, and government is working towards building a truly harmonized Guyana, although we're made up of diverse people. What are some of the plans come 2018 to further strengthen those efforts?
What I found, and I would want to continue along that way, is going out into the communities and meeting face-to-face with the people in the different communities, different geographical locations, different culture, different ethnic extractions, even different socioeconomic standing. It is so important that we know who we're dealing with and what are their take on certain very sensitive subject areas. I find it very interesting. It was only now that I'm in the Ministry of Social Cohesion that every effort was made for me to visit a particular community in Guyana called Amakokopai, which is the headquarters of the Akowa's indigenous religion, where they have their own chants and their own ceremonies. And I think it was so good for me to have gone there and to see the lady priest. She was not necessarily the head of the village, that is, but she was their spiritual leader. And she had her own committee which she works by. If I hadn't gone there, I would not have known they actually existed. And we in the religious community think only of Christian, Muslims, and Hindus. But we've got to change that somewhat, make some amount of accommodation, flex a bit, and involve other sect, other religion, and try to get them involved.
And what are some of the policies, programs that will be undertaken to get this involvement that you speak of?
What is fortunate about the Ministry of Social Cohesion is that because it was a new ministry, we got the United Nations Development Program on board. And they have been working in Guyana since 2002, but not as a ministry. And they've been working towards getting the nation as cohesive as ever. When it became a ministry, they came on board directly, involving in the setting up of a strategic plan for a period of 5 years of social cohesion as a ministry. They did this by consultation across the board, both face-to-face consultation and through social media, whether it was by radio and telephone or by Facebook, however it was done. And I think they managed to have a true representation of what consultation was supposed to be like. As a result of that, the information was there, and with their expertise, they managed to not only have a document taking into consideration all the contributions, but also they came on board in the implementation process. So we have a plan, and we're following that plan. It is what we described as the roadmap to social cohesion.
And could you give us some details on that roadmap? I know you visited quite a number of villages in 2017 with the outreaches, consultations. How many more do you plan to do in 2018? And what would be some of the features of those visits?
First of all, there is a structured approach where we first of all send one of our what you might refer to technicians to the area. They do a lot of groundwork, and then we manage to get them together in what is referred to as a sensitization exercise. And then after that first sensitization, then we go back for a longer period of time where we actually do some training. And we get to communicate, for it to be a dialogue kind of interaction. And I think it's very effective. And we plan to continue along that line. And of course, there is the feedback, where after the sensitization, then the training, then we follow up to see if, for instance, we did leave groups formed that might have taken on a project, then we go back to evaluate that project. And it's interesting because, like, we had an exercise in Skeldon, and we had persons coming from as far as Oriala that went back, formed a youth group, and had taken on some projects. We visited them in Oriala, and we found that they were functioning well. And I think that tells us that it's something that can become a reality. What we do need is some amount of guidance, some amount of evaluation, and to communicate. We're getting more and more along that line.
Thank you, Minister. In terms of youth, what are some of the plans, objectives of your ministry going forward?
It's the policy right now that the ministry will undertake all the training processes and courses that has to do with youths. We do have a situation in Ghana where the youths are concerned that we must do all we can in order to arrest it. And one of the strategies was to have different groups, different cluster with different aims and objectives. We started out that way. I think we have reached a stage where we can once again monitor and evaluate and to see what our results are and make the necessary adjustment. Because youth plays such an important role in attaining the mission and vision of social cohesion, bringing youth under the remit of social cohesion, I think is a natural fit. And it was only a question of time before we would have had to involve the youths directly and across the different clusters. And I think if we can get our allocations directed the right way, we should be seeing better results than we had for the last 2 years or so on.
Cultural preservation, you spoke a lot about that in a previous interview. Could you tell us a little bit more of the focus to ensure that our cultures are preserved and some of the activities that will be undertaken by the ministry in the new year?
You know, this idea of having a salad bowl rather than a puree of vegetables is how we like to put it over. In that, yes, we have different cultures, but we hope that by first of all recognizing who we are and what our cultures are, only then we can appreciate another culture. And in order to do so, you don't necessarily have to dilute yours. And we think wanting to accept you more in that way, whereby even if you belong to the same religious group or, let's say, ethnic background, it does not necessarily mean that you all have to do things the same way. We have only made, for instance, some persons of Indian extractions from Guadeloupe visiting us here in Guyana. And their take on certain customs, food, drink, dance, and so on here in Guyana is totally different from ours that we have here. It could be because India is such a large country, the geographical area from which they come. You know, we have been invited from I think South India, where the Tamil culture is, and that would be entirely different from, let's say, in places like Nagpur, which is much more in the northern part of India. So even within a particular cluster, we will have differences, and we should be able to recognize it.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the culture policy, how do we move forward with that? It's been long awaited, and we have a draft. How do we move forward with that?
You know, we have a youth policy that was presented in Parliament. We have a draft sport policy as well, and of course, the cultural policy. We also have a policy on social cohesion. I'm more familiar with that because I was more involved, but I like the whole process of consultation as wide as possible and in different forms. You will be surprised to know what one might chat with you on, let's say, on Facebook. And when you reach that person physically, it's an entirely different something. Or someone speaking to you on a telephone, and the person is somebody entirely different, to the person who you meet personally. And it tells us that unless we are prepared to use all these different medias, only then we will have a true picture of consultation. And any policy that we have, we must have full consultation. I am not so certain that those drafts that we have, or even the one that was presented in the Parliament, has undergone that process, because it costs money, it costs time, it needs expertise. Guyana geographical layout is, really, really difficult. Even in a region, for instance, from Karasaba in the north of the Rupununi, where you have the Mukushi, to Aishalton south, where you have the Wap channels, you have quite a lot of difference there. But in order for you to get a true picture that will involve both communities, you have to get them on board by either visiting. And that is just an example of how much work has to be done in either of the or any policy before you can have a true representation. But even then, after having that policy, let's say in the tome form, in a book form, then you have to validate it, where you can make some adjustments, particularly with specific stakeholders. And after then, having that policy on board, it should be something that is accessible to all. Because giving an idea to someone and that person recording it and putting it in written form, you might find it's a different interpretation when you look at it again. Hence, there's that possibility for you to make some adjustments and so on. You go through that validation process, and it means nothing if you are not going to have a strategy of how you're going to implement your policy. So while I wouldn't want to reinvent the wheel, it is said that there's no such thing, but I know we can break down only to build up, and that I wouldn't want to do. So we will have to look at what is there. It will have cost somebody some time, and somebody ought to be in control of a certain amount of faculties, resources, in order to arrive at a policy, unless it's a policy that really is worthless. And I would never say that of any. So we will have to evaluate it and look at the best way of putting it into reality.
Is there a timeline which you're using to, do these consultations, any starting point, and when, involvement by any international partners in terms of validating, etc.?
I must tell you that many times we will have to involve the international partners, because they've been doing it for the longest while. They've got the expertise in it. I can tell you that academically we're very limited here in Guyana for not necessarily Guyanese, but Guyanese who are living in Guyana in that aspect. I was in public health, and I cry out because we had no masters in public health, who you need to do your administration, who you need to carry out your programs. And we had to make a special effort to have persons who want to do masters in public health to get that possibility at the University of Guyana, either by giving them a full scholarship or by doing a partial scholarship, but just encouraging them to go. And because and that's just in public health, in social cohesion, in sports, culture, youth, we might not even have anybody available. So yes, we might have to look to international partners. But you know, if for instance, and I told you from the beginning, it costs a lot of money, and an organization is involved in one stage, and they would realize that they wouldn't get the full value for their money if they're not involved in the next step, then they might be encouraged to come on board and help us. In the meantime, however, we've got to do our homework, and we learn as we go along. I'm the first to tell you that there is a certain amount of complacency that one encounters. Persons are not punctual, persons are not committed. It's time, as managers, we hold persons to timelines and certain goals. And if you don't achieve that, then you let them know up front that you would be forced to make other decisions. Because it makes no sense hoping that somebody will remember to do something when they just keep forgetting. We don't have that luxury of a second chance or of waiting for too long. So as managers, we've got to play our part. And you know, to rule by example is really the best. Lead by example is one of the best ways to get things done. I shudder at the thought of micromanaging, but sometimes, you know, the second check, you know, the second call to make certain that this is done, prepares you for the result, and many a times avoid disappointment.
Thank you, Minister. Sport development, could we talk a little bit about some of the plans for that area? It also ties into social cohesion as well.
It is one of the areas that we want to capitalize on, because it certainly is the icebreaker. I think it's the most effective of the media that we can use in achieving social cohesion. I was, for so many reasons, reminded that I'm not the Minister of Sports. I've got a passion for sports. This is all my life, and at this stage, I don't think I can change. I'm seeing the results. I feel good about being involved with sports. I had no reason before, in spite of my desire, of meeting sports personality in the country. Now I have to, and I can tell you that I do enjoy it. I want to meet every team that comes back in or even leave the country representing Guyana. I want to be able to identify our national athlete. I must say this is Kanesha William Skeet, who is passing there. I must look at Mr. Williams, you know, and know that this is the 9th fastest 400-meter runner in the world. This is Mr. Caesar, who, you know, did so and so. Whether you're from Linden or whether it's Jermaine King from Cumberland Kanji, you know, like the girl that came in from Achiweb who ran the 10,000 and won. I have a special interest in knowing them, in meeting them. Because I'm responsible for sport, I find that I look forward to that. And I hope that, you know, it would work in our best interests. I'm very, very optimistic about our chances. in sports. I used to, before, place the blame on the fact that, well, we're not even 1 million people yet. But Jamaica is not 2 million either, and Trinidad either. Little Grenada has gone to the Olympics on more than one occasion and for 40 years we've got ourselves a bronze medal and nothing more. And I'm seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, especially with our track and field stars. I said it on public television that with our national schools championship that I was excited as the athlete. That is not to say that we don't have a far way yet to go. I still think that we need to put so many structures in place that for too long we took it for granted. You know, a comment was made in Parliament that we're sporting with sport. You can't sport with sport. It is serious business. It means so much to us. And I think it has come to a stage where I must not get goosebumps for other nations when I see 1, 2, and 3 that's from a particular nation. And you know, when I saw the Miller girl from Bahamas plunging in front of the Alexis, what was her name? Alison Felix. You know, I can see that ever so often. I don't know them, they don't mean anything to me except the fact that they're athletes. And it would have been so much better if it was the Guyanese girl plunging or even being in the, you know. And I'm looking forward to that day when I can see Miss Skeet or Miss Williams or Miss Bright, somebody on international television getting that gold medal. And you know, even in my presentation today, I became emotional because I can see it there. That it's not too far away, but we've got to do much more. For too long, we depended on people, on raw talent. You know, it's much more than that. And when I refer to the fact that we're going to employ a sports psychologist, it sounded kind of like frivolous, but it means so much because that person, Guyanese, you know, here, would have gone to the University of the West Indies, spent 4 years of our university life doing a particular subject area that can make a difference in our sports arena here in Guyana.
Okay, Minister, thank you so much. Before we get ready to wrap up, any final thoughts on Budget 2018 you would like to leave with the Guyanese public?
I have confidence in my ministers. And most of all, I have confidence in the Minister of Finance. And I think with, if I might say, him being there at the helm and urging us on to get our bill of quantities, our terms of reference, our what you might refer to as our contracts out and awarded, I think we will do well. Even in spite of the fact that we've got these austerity measures and so on. So I'm optimistic. It is not going to be easy, but I feel confident.
Thank you so much, Minister, and thank you so much, viewers, for joining us on this segment of Budget in Focus. Join us again. I'm Stacey Carmichael, and with me was Minister of Social Cohesion with Responsibility for Culture, Youth and Sport, Dr. George Norton. Thank you.
Thank you very much.